Thanks for listening to the February 2025 episode of Deepdale Podcast, our magazine podcast about the beautiful North Norfolk Coast. This month we visit two of our local museums, Cromer Museum and Sheringham Museum, the Mo, discovering the hidden treasures in these wonderful local attractions. It's clear how incredibly passionate the curators and volunteers are and the deep knowledge they have about the local area and its history. Our Simon also returns with the top 5 local views, and Ollie from the One Stop Nature Shop gives us a local wildlife update. We really hope you enjoy the listen. Please do subscribe to the Deepdale Podcast wherever you usually get your podcasts from, and please let your friends and family know about us. If you have the time, we'd love you to leave a review, as it all helps encourage more listeners. Enjoy the listen.
Skies all open wide, geese go high and over. Oh, now you're a beachcomber, a fistful of samphire, sea, lavender, see you next year.
Welcome to Cromer Museum. My name is Alan Tutt.
If anybody hasn't been here who's listening to the podcast, basically it's a lovely little museum right in the heart of Cromer. We're right next to the parish church and we're overlooking some of the shops.
The museum goes through from Church Street to Tucker Street, so if you come out the back entrance, you're virtually on the seafront.
We're just going to have a wander round and learn a little bit more about what is where, why you should come and visit this lovely little place. So lead on.
So here we have East Cottages. There are 5 of them. They are Victorian cottages, and they used to be inhabited by local people, mainly fisher folk. And when in the 70s the last tenants began to leave, the local town council had the prescience to turn it into a museum. So these cottages are now the museum, and these were the outhouses and toilets that went with the cottages, and they are also now part of the museum. So it's all pretty authentic.
When were these cottages from? When were they built?
They were built in Victorian times, so 1870s, 1890s, and they were turned. You can see on this official stone on the wall here that the museum itself opened in 1978. So we're coming round to nearly 50 years that the museum has been operating in Cromer.
So who had the foresight to not have these cottages either gentrified or, knocked down and actually turn it into a museum?
I think there were a number of individuals on the town council who had the prescience to see the potential. Cromer, as you know, is mainly famous for seaside, but on a rainy day, a horrible day, what else do you do? So there's a backup in terms of Cromer Museum for people to come in, and believe you me, when we get bad weather on a summer day, the families pour in.
Yeah, they can imagine, yeah. A lovely old clinker-built boat. Is this one of the fishing boats, or is it an old RNLI boat?
This is one of the last wooden fishing boats. It's called Little Swallow. We have got photographs of it out at sea. As you can see, it was donated to the museum quite a long time ago by Richard Davis, who was a former Cromer lifeboat coxswain.
And lots of local information about the fishermen that used to live in this place and the family life that they had. I love the water pump outside. That's great.
Would you like to step inside the cottages?
Excellent. That'd be great. Yeah. So we're looking at a big display cabinet with lots of really interesting information about the town, the stores and the bottles and the various different shops and the printers and that kind of thing.
So essentially, as I mentioned outside, there are 5 cottages, and each one has a kind of different theme. Some of them are quite old-fashioned still. Some of them have been right up to date, modernised. We're standing in the living room cum kitchen of the end cottage, which has been left in an authentic way with utensils, crab boats, and a figure of a fisherman sitting in a chair, perhaps dozing in front of the Arga. We've always known him as Valentine, although we don't quite know where that name evolved from. And he's both popular and unpopular with visitors. Some people love him, some people feel a bit scared of him when they come in.
If you don't, I didn't realise he was there. And you suddenly realise that someone's sitting in the corner from out the side of your face, and you're like, oh, right, okay, yes.
He's very realistic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, very.
The room would have been lit by gaslight. When I first started here, this was still functioning, so we used to come in, light the gas light, and it made a very nice light in the room, and it used to make a nice little putting sound. But it used to break down a lot, and health and safety, so we just got a subdued light now.
I can imagine that the insurance company were much keener when that was switched off.
Got a little piano here.
Excellent.
Badly in need of a tune.
Yes, although it looks like it's had a few years in its life, and it may be quite difficult to tune well.
We're hoping to get another one, actually, one that people can actually play. That's the plan. And if we go up these little winding stairs, we come to the cottage bedroom.
Lovely.
Quite narrow. This was the little bedroom. There might have been a family of, say, up to 8 people living in these 2 rooms, so overcrowded.
Wow.
Yeah.
When teenagers complain about the size of their bedroom now, that puts us in some proportion, doesn't it, really?
Everyone piled up on top of each other. Got a little kiddies area up here now, and some nice displays in the very old cabinets in this room. A Gansey, famously worn by fishermen in these parts, not just Cromer, Sheringham and up and along the coast. It's
sort of like a half smock, half jumper, isn't it, really? It's sort of, they look very comfortable, I have to say.
Quite tight fitting, because you don't want it catching on anything when you're working. There is also some anecdotal evidence that each Gansey had its own design of knit, and if unfortunately the fisherman or sailor was swept overboard and then washed up, you would know who it was by the design in the knit. Quite hard to see, but down in the corner there is an exhibit relating to the Empress of Austria, who visited Cromer at the height of the kind of Victorian boom for going to the seaside, and that little brooch was presented by her to postmaster who helped her with her mail and what have you. So she was quite a celebrity in her time, and she was actually fearful of being assassinated. This is in the years going up to the First World War. So she often was, very careful about people around her. And in fact, it proved to be, unfortunately, what happened to her was she was later assassinated on the continent. A previous colleague of mine painted these rather nice Cromer-related murals.
They're beautiful murals. The sea creatures are absolutely stunning. The mammoth is fantastic. Who was it who painted the murals?
Rebecca Lusher. In this second cottage where we came in, there are some slightly more old-fashioned cases, and this one is particularly interesting. Hundreds of years ago, Cromer wasn't really Cromer. There was a town here called Shipton, and that was basically half a mile out what is now sea.
Right, okay.
So through coastal erosion, the village or the town was abandoned. So there was a church there, and then they moved it. They focused more on Cromer. People were sceptical about whether Shipton existed, and an early curator here, Martin Warren, who unfortunately passed away last year, he trained to be a diver, just to do one dive down to Shipton, which he did, and he brought up these are fragments of masonry and church and what have you, and he was convinced that Shipton existed. Did exist, and these bits here. I think now, with modern technology, we would have had more photographs and film about his dive, and maybe someone will do one again sometime, But it shows you in a way, that in this photograph here, instead of the pier, you've got the jetty. It just shows you the rate of coastal erosion, which is
absolutely
still going on,
Yeah, it's amazing the number of villages that have been shifted in Norfolk, whether it's plague or whether it's coastal erosion or whatever else. It's incredible, the change is.
So I mentioned earlier that as well as old-fashioned parts of the museum, there's some modern parts of the museum, and these two cottages are mainly devoted to Olive Edis, who was a very important Edwardian photographer. She had studios in both London and in Cromer / Sheringham. In her London studio, she took photographs of some quite famous people, including Thomas Hardy, the disgraced king, Edward VIII, and also, as a contrast, local people, local fishermen.
Wow, they are amazing portraits, aren't they?
She seemed to have a gift of rapport with the fishermen, so they seemed very relaxed in the pictures, but also able to capture the life they lived.
You can see the sea in their faces, can't you? It's just incredible, just how much weather they've seen. It's incredible. Yeah.
So another previous curator, Alistair Murphy, had the foresight to, when these photographs came up for sale from an assistant of Olive Edis, and he had the foresight to get together a grant to be able to buy them whenever, 10, 15 years ago. And at first there was a large display of the photographs in the Castle Museum in Norwich, and then when that finished after a few months, it was contracted a little bit to become this exhibition here. I would say this is arguably the most popular draw in the museum, together with the fossil and geology galleries, which we'll come to later.
For a female photographer in those days, it must have been,
She was a pioneer.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was definitely a pioneer. And in fact, she pioneered a technique of kind of semi-colour called autochrome, and she also became the first female war photographer at the end of the First World War. She got that title in circa 1918, 1919. So she took photographs of women working in the World War, nurses, armaments, that kind of thing. A lot of those went to the Imperial War Museum. They felt it was more fitting to go there. Yeah. But we have got some, and that is some of her rather hefty old equipment there.
Lugging that around, that must be quite incredible, really. Yeah, it actually looks a lot lighter than you'd imagine. The plates alone must have weighed a ton. Is this her up here?
Yeah, that's Olive, yeah. And then this last room in the cottage, devoted to art related to Cromer. And these are actually, if I had to choose a favourite, these three would be what I'd choose. There was an artist called John Moray Smith, and he was employed by Morgan's Brewery in Norwich to create unique artworks in public houses and outside public houses, a sort of early form of branding, if you like.
Yep.
And he created these sort of 3D friezes. We were lucky enough to have 3 of them, which came out of the Ship Inn, which was on Church Street in Cromer. But if you go to Norwich, there's still quite a lot of these around in pubs and indeed other places in Norfolk. He was a bit of an enigmatic character. He lived in Coasty. I've had difficulty pronouncing that because I'm not from Norfolk. Coasty. And there is no picture of him in existence. We would love to know what he looked like.
The detail is just amazing. I love the one of the beach. That just brings alive, the fact that it's sort of a 3D nature is just absolutely incredible.
I don't know whether you remember an artist called Beryl Reid.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
little bit hint of that.
Yes, it's definitely got hints of that, hasn't it? Yeah. Slightly kinder to the ladies in their bikinis than Beryl.
Yeah.
But
And we've got the valiant Henry Blogg here.
Yes.
Who of course has his own museum in Cromer, separate to us, equally brilliant museum. In the summer, this is a lovely sun trap, and you often get people sitting here on the benches, and it overlooks this fantastic church, the parish church. And when we're opening up, sometimes in the morning, you've got people practicing the organ or it's bell ring, and it's quite an evocative feeling, And also, throughout the early months of the year, we now have peregrine falcon watch outside. The birds started nesting 6 or 7 years ago on the top there, and we've had quite a few, fledged, and you can hear those birds, shrieking.
The chicks are so loud, it's quite incredible, isn't it, really?
So these are our geology and fossil galleries. Bang up to date. The North Norfolk Coast has become a real focus for people looking for fossils and also being interested in the geology of the area. School children, school groups that come, this is their favourite part of the museum. When I was a kid at school, I don't think we even did geology and fossils really. I've had to get up to speed with it a little bit, but the kids now just know so much, and they love these galleries, especially things like parts of the West Runton mammoth, which is unique, which is found just a couple of villages up at West Runton, and lots of other fossils and stuff from the coast. And very interesting video about what is now called the Deep History Coast. Dr. David Waterhouse and Mr. Davis there.
Yes, I've done a podcast with him. We had a great chat about it, actually. So this links up to that really nicely, actually.
We've also got items left behind by ancient humans, Stone Age people in Norfolk. And once a year, we have events throughout the summer, different kinds of events. And one of the events features a man called John Lord, who is an exponent of creating Stone Age tools from just raw flint, and he spends all day here, shows you the techniques, and he was lucky enough to give me one of his ones that he made.
That's stunningly
beautiful, isn't it?
You can feel how sharp that is. You could really do some incredible work with that, couldn't you? Yeah, flint is such a versatile material, isn't it? It's incredible when you look at the buildings and the fact that we used to use it as damp-proof course and everything else, and also it was there to skin animals and cut up meat and do all sorts of other things.
That's right. Yeah.
Definitely worth coming to see, and if you're even in the slightest bit interested in the history of this part of the coast, then you must come in here and have a look around. It's incredible.
Although we're closed in the winter, we reopen on round about April the 1st or 2nd, and then we're open every single day for 7 months, Monday to Sunday, all the way, 7 months.
Excellent.
So do come along, and it's quite inexpensive, and there's discounts for older people and families.
Well, thank you so much for showing me around. Really kind of you, And it's, if you haven't been here, you definitely need to pop in and have a look round. The Sex Pistols in Cromer.
It may surprise people that back in the day there was a large hotel to the left there called the Royal Links Hotel, and attached to it was the Royal Links Pavilion, which at the time was used for ballroom dancing and other sedate activities. The Links Hotel burned down, the pavilion kept going, and then through the 60s, 70s started to have bands, rock bands, pop bands on there. And a lot of people in the town, long before I arrived, have got very, very fond memories of those gigs, exciting gigs. I mean, there was a surprising number of that kids could do here, go and see these bands. But perhaps the best of all, Christmas Eve, 1977, the Sex Pistols rolled into town and played at the Royal Links Pavilion. You could buy your ticket for the gig from the cinema in Cromer. And it was touch and go whether it was going to go ahead, because at the time, obviously, the Sex Pistols were attracting a lot of negative publicity, and the council met, I think, and they decided they would go ahead. And so, Christmas Eve, we saw the Sex Pistols in Cromer, and there's a little booklet about it there. There's the original poster.
Oh, I love that poster. That's brilliant.
It would have cost you £1.75 to see what they've described as the most famous band in the world. Okay.
That's great.
And what is even more interesting, the next day was Christmas Day. The Sex Pistols then went up to Huddersfield, and in the afternoon they performed a special set for kids, and despite their fearsome reputation, they gave them a lot of presents, skateboards and all kind, and then they played in the evening for the adults, and that was the last ever Sex Pistols gig in UK. They went over to the USA, and the rest It was a disaster unfolding, Sid Vicious, etc., etc.
Hello, listeners to the podcast. I'm going to be discussing the top 5 views in all of North Norfolk. That was the task. So I've modified that slightly to just run across the North Norfolk coast from sunny Hunstanton, all the way to Wells next to the sea. So just our doorstep of Deepdale. That's what we'll be covering today. And we will start in Hunstanton with, of course, its famous cliffs. Orange, red, white, striped cliffs, very rare. But at sunset, they come into their own. So the first view would be Hunstanton Cliffs at sunset. You're down on the beach, you look back at the cliffs there, you'll see them just radiating the colour, reflecting it back, amplifying it. Those orange and red sunsets coming off the cliff are fantastic. And if you're lucky enough to have the blues and mauves, deep purples, again behind that, contrasting that as you look up, it really is a memorable view. And I'm not the only one that if I spy a decent looking sunset from my house in Hunstanton, we all run down there to have a look. It's good for the soul. So that's Hunstanton, first stop. The next stop along the coast would probably be Barrow Common. It's a favourite of ours at Deepdale. Everyone loves it. It's the nearest hill we have that looks out over the salt marsh onto Scolthead Island and further out to the sea. If you like quaint little villages here and there, that's the view that I always have conjured. So head up behind the Jolly Sailors pub, you'll find Barrow Common, and there's some great little walks around there, but there are some fantastic views you must keep in your mind. So well worth going up to Barrow Common. A little bit further, a little bit closer to us, is of course the White Horse pub. It's right on the salt marsh. The Norfolk Coast path goes past it. And if you want to sit down, have a nice beer, nice cold beer, nice glass of wine, gin and tonic, whatever, it's a great place to sit, socialise with just some of the best views out across our very own little salt marsh and onto Scolthead Island. You can watch the boats go by. It's a fantastic view. My recommendation for a good view. Have we done Holcombe Beach? I don't think we have. We're going further. We're going past us at Deepdale now onto Holcombe Beach. Coming up onto Holcombe Beach, I feel the best view is right there coming up from Burnham Overy Staithe. If you're on the coast path again, doing the walk, it'll be a surprise for you. Follow the path, climb the dune, and enjoy the views that are presented to you as you walk probably towards Wells. Probably, if you're going that way, it's one of the best beaches in the UK, I'm sure. It's Holcombe Beach. It's massive. Definitely taking the approach from Burnham Overy Staithe. I mean, really, the best view after that would be up. Look up at night. Anywhere. Pick any of those spots. But any of those spots, anywhere along here, you can just stop at night, look up. If you're walking across the campsite for some reason in the middle of the night, take the time, turn your torch off, have a look up in the sky. If it's clear, it's magnificent. You can reach out, you can touch the Milky Way, I'm sure. Well, I've tried. Get yourself nice and warm, get yourself down to Holcombe Beach. That's a great place to watch stars and do that stargazing. Well, ladies and gents, that was the top 5 views, my top 5 views. They are the classics around Hunstanton to Wells next to sea.
So we are here at the Sheringham Museum, otherwise known as the Mo, and I am with 2 of the key personnel. They're going to introduce themselves shortly. We're standing next to a lifeboat, which I'm sure we'll understand more about shortly, and a box that's got a town crier's outfit in, which I believe is causing some headaches as to how that all goes together. But I'm sure we'll learn more in a minute. Please do introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Lisa Little. I'm the curator and museum manager.
And I'm Mhairi Campbell. I'm chair of the board of directors for Sheringham Museum.
So how long has the Sheringham Museum been here? When did it start?
Well, we've been here for over a decade in this building as it is. Previously to that, we actually had 3 cottages that were in the town. So we got too big for our boots, really. We got offered the lifeboats, as you've already mentioned. There's one of them behind us. But we actually have 4 lifeboats from Sheringham in the building, which you haven't seen yet. So we'll take you on a wander around to show you those. But when the very large lifeboat came, which is the Manchester Unity of Oddfellows, which when it was retired...
That's quite a name.
It is. It was paid for by them, so a friendly society, from when it was retired from the RNLI, and it's something that I remember in my lifetime. So it was in service in the up into the late 1980s. Yes, so that is enormous, and it was offered to the museum, raised funds, and we purchased it. Obviously, you can't fit a very large lifeboat or 4 in a very small cottage.
Yes.
So the museum had to move. So we came to this location, which is actually right on the seafront on the prom. Lots of people walk past and they see the big 5-foot letters that say museum, and they come in and go, "Are you the museum?" It's like, well, funnily enough, yes, we are. It literally is what it says on the tin. And they're always surprised by how large we are indeed. And we are huge. So you've just come in and seen the top floor, but we will show you all the rest of it shortly.
Excellent. And how long have you both been involved?
Oh gosh, it will be 8 years this year since I've been here. They've had to put up with me for a very long time, haven't they?
And in my case, about 5 years.
Great. Well, lead on. Let's go and see.
Currently, we're just on the top deck. This changes every year, so we have a temporary exhibition that changes. Last year it was Fishing and Faith, which was about the town and obviously fishing and Salvation Army and all of those type of kind of faiths were really important for the town. This year, it's going to be Twixt Sea and Pine, which is 50-year celebration of Sheringham from 1975 to present day. So we're doing some very fun things. So we're looking at when Woolworths went, that kind of thing, which nobody could go and buy the sellotape up the high street. And also things like toys, shopping, when we finally got Channel 4 because of the Cromer Ridge being in the way, which was quite late, as I recall. Those sorts of things. And the town crier's uniform is part of it. So there was a fantastic town crier here called Tony Nelson. There's a very good town crier now still as well. But the previous one, who was the first one, he was a very imposing figure, and he was very much present within all events in the town, and he was a very big personality. So we're featuring him and his regalia in the exhibition. So I'm just trying to work out what jabot goes with which waistcoat and which cape at the moment.
And it's very important to get those right.
Oh, it is. It really is, because somebody will tell me if I've got it wrong.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, we had exactly the same issue with Branxter because we were supplied by the Yorkshire Aerial. And for years, we couldn't get Anglia at all. So we knew exactly what was going on in York and places like that, but no idea what was going on in Norwich or Cambridge. The days of old analogue signals and limited aerials. So there we go.
We actually had to build this top floor in order to lift in the lifeboat that you saw as you entered the museum today. So this was an extension in 2017.
It was completed in 2017.
Yeah.
For the Atlantic 75, which is the most recently retired lifeboat here in Sheringham. So it's called that because it's 7.5 metres long. So
logic.
Yeah,
yes,
it is. It is. So it's literally is like the elephant in the room, but we have a lifeboat in the room, so you can't miss it. And
there is an elephant. It's a mammoth in the corner. Yes.
I hadn't mentioned that, had I? I'm so used to seeing very odd, big things in the museum. You do get it in museums, obviously. Yes, we have a very large fiberglass mammoth currently just sort of wintering inside. We pop it out after the frosts have gone and it lives on the balcony. So
I love the fact that you've given him a great view out of the window across the beach. That's fantastic. I love it.
I think that was just essential. It was very heavy, actually, so we just carried it the minimum amount of size. Exactly.
And if you come in to see our mammoth, he is covered in the most beautiful paintings of climate change. So come in and you can go out onto the balcony and see him when he's out there looking out at sea.
Well, we're standing up in this fabulous observation tower. Oh, it is absolutely stunning. You get to look right along the beach in both directions, and it's really fabulous.
Always warm, even on a freezing day as well in here. It's just lovely. It's nice.
Worth coming up here in bad weather as well as good, because a stormy day, the view is stunning.
We've got the wind energy displays here as well, and that's also free entry for people who want to come along and have a look. And it's being redisplayed brand new for when we open on March the 29th. Watch this space. So we're very excited about it. So it will look so brilliant. If it's anything like the images that we've seen and the presentations, yeah, it will be great. So we've been working with the designers to do it, and it's some of the designers that works and did the displays at the London Science Museum as well. So it's going to be some good hands-on things in here too.
Paid for by the wind farm companies.
Yes. So we like working. Obviously, we can see the wind farm from here.
You can look straight out the window.
Yeah, you can, and they're building the new ones there as well. So it all relates to what we do here. So although we've got one foot in the past telling the story of Sheringham, we like to think about the future as well, and the future is new energies and all the possibilities that come with that.
So tell me about this very large boat that you really wouldn't expect to find, and it certainly would not have fitted in a small cottage.
No, it definitely wouldn't have fitted into it at all. Well, that was the big game changer, really, having that one, but it's not just the Manchester Unity of Oddfellows, which is the Oakley class of lifeboat. It's the last offshore lifeboat that they had here in Sheringham. But when people come in, they are so impressed, and they go, oh, it's a really big lifeboat. But then what you say is, yes, but behind that we've got the Forester's Centenary lifeboat, which is the first lifeboat that we had in Sheringham that actually had a motor, and then behind that is the rowing and the sailing one as well. So actually you go back in time the further you get into the building. So there are 3 lifeboats on our ground floor.
The lifeboats in Sheringham now are just inshore. The offshore one is in Cromer at the end of the pier.
There is, and there, I think Wells is as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So so that's it really. Yeah. So the Atlantic 75 we have upstairs. The one that we've actually got currently in use at the end of the prom, which is the opposite end of the prom to us, is the Atlantic 85. So after I said earlier on about the measurement of it, you can guess that that's 8.5 metres.
Yeah. And some very big engines.
Yes, absolutely. And a tractor and a catch net for when it comes in, which is quite fun.
It's a quite exciting thing to see, isn't it?
The Atlantic 75, the lifeboat that you saw when you entered the museum, was one that there was money put towards that from Blue Peter. So if anybody remembers those days when they had their great big things that lit up. Yes, I think it was milk bottle tops paid for the lifeboat.
The totaliser, yes. So walking around the lifeboats, so we're going past our sort of coming of the railway, our seaside beach hut display. That's the other side of the large lifeboat. So just to say that we've got lifeboats here, that doesn't really kind of cover it, because what we've been trying to do is to feminise the social history collections. Obviously, the lifeboats are very imposing, but we tell the story of the fishermen and the fisher families, and we try and do as much as that through textiles as we can. So we are the East Anglia Centre for Ganseys. So the East Anglian Gansey Group founded here by myself and one of the Board of Trustees, one of the other trustees, and we've been working on lots and lots of Ganseys, which is fishermen's sweaters, for those that don't know. Behind you, hanging up, is our incredibly large, giant Gansey of Inclusivity that was worn by a puppet that went in various carnivals displays at the Forum, and it's got flags of inclusivity all across the whole bottom of the part of the Gansey. And it is 16 feet wide.
You'd probably fit most of the England rugby team in that.
It still looks big next to the lifeboat, so that shows you. It's a lot of knitting. So myself and David Shenton, who's a cartoonist in Norwich and works a lot with Pride and LGBT+, did lots of cartoons in The Observer, and so he's very well known in the kind of illustrative circuit. He worked on that, and he's also a knitter. So he knitted the colour work on the bottom half, and I got the navy blue boring bit, so which just went on and on and on. But it's, you needed that bit to hold it together and make it into a jumper. So it's
very, very impressive. Lifeboats only worked if the community worked, and the fishing communities only worked if the community worked, didn't they? So it was all interconnected. And although you find that people focus on the 10 men or 15 men or whatever it was who were rowing the lifeboats and the incredibly heroic stuff that sometimes they did to get people out of the sea. they are only able to do that on the fact that there was a whole support network of other people, as you say, knitting the jumpers and putting the cork life jackets together and, you know, building the boats and making the repairs and all that sort of stuff. So it was a community spirit all the way through.
It really was. Yeah, you've got to think of the Gansey's, their wet weather gear, because they didn't have, you know, Gore-Tex or anything brilliant like you have today. So you would have your sou'wester that you would often oil at home and make at home. That would often get really sort of hard and start cracking in cold weather, or smell horrible and start melting a little bit. Yeah, can you imagine in the hot weather? But the Ganseys, they're something that we're really proud of, because we've got lots of exhibitions and we've been doing lots of touring things around the country, down the East Coast with our Ganseys as well, and we're documenting and evidencing and using photographs and actual ones that we have in our collection to make replicas of all of them. So we have over 40 of those, and we've got over 40 in our main collection as well. So
am I right in thinking that they were quite personalised, so that you could almost tell who they were from the jumper, even if you couldn't necessarily identify them from the body?
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's a bit of a myth buster. Yeah, because everybody says, oh, you can identify somebody that was washed out to sea by their jumper, by the pattern on it. That's not necessarily true. It's true that some of the family members, so it would be a mother or a wife perhaps, that would knit them for the fisherman, for the husband, or the son even. But also you would have people who would be out workers, who were knitters, who would do it for other people, because not everybody knitted. Not everybody had a wife or a mother still who could do it or wanted to do it. So there were certain people in Sheringham who knitted for other fishermen, including the Cromer ones as well. So Cromer people all came to Sheringham, including like Henry Blogg and all of those. They all came to Sheringham and had their Ganseys knitted. So Sheringham is unusual for that, because we were knitting the finest Ganseys in the country, arguably, but they are much finer than all of the ones in Guernsey, which all the way down the North Coast. So we're very proud of our very fine knitters.
Each year we hold International Gansey Day.
All things Gansey. We have people that come from all over the world to it. It is our busiest day of the year, busiest than the August bank holiday. We are absolutely rammed, and Sheringham is dead, but for people, but they've all booked up and they're all staying here, and all these people come to look, men and women alike, all interested in knitting and about the social history and the families, and it's the stories that you tell. The patterns are lovely, so some of the knitters would knit a pattern and the knitter would favour the pattern, but then they may have spotted that pattern that is the relief motif on the jumper, perhaps by going over to Lowestoft or Galston, going to church, going and having a look and seeing what the Herring girls were doing. Because the Sheringham knitters, we know, were nosy, because we've got them sort of interviews from the 1960s and earlier, and anecdotally they did say, I'm just going to go over to Lowestoft and have a quick look and see what they're bringing down with them. So those patterns would all change, and then obviously there's a bit of cross-fertilisation. Some of the Scottish people came down and they married here, and some of us didn't just stay in Sheringham, they moved, and we did move, and we did go, contrary to popular belief, they did leave Sheringham and they did go to other places and take their patterns with them. We also have 3 fishing boats on this floor. The Windsor Rose is currently undergoing its annual restoration, so it's just having a bit of a clean up and a lick of paint on the inside of it as well. And the fisherman that worked in this boat, and his father before him, is actually popping in tomorrow to come and have a look at it and say hello, which is really nice. Great. It's really nice. So that looks actually very small compared to the JC Madge, which is our oldest lifeboat that we have here. And you can't imagine that. You can't imagine a bunch of blokes having to row that in horrific weather. It's such a heavy piece of, and I know that it had to be strong and it had to cope with the winds, but oh my word, it's a whole different level. 16 oars, so 16 men would have, and it is a substantial bit of kit. Mhairi told a fantastic story about this.
It made its way all the way to Grimsby, and the men were literally had to be lifted out. At the end they were frozen. This was in snow after a rescue. So they went up to Grimsby, and then they were lucky. They got towed back part of the way. But there were no mobile phones, nothing. The families thought that their men were gone. They just didn't know. So, there's a lot to hear about in the museum. We've got a lot of interactive stuff, stories and films and so on that help to put you in the picture.
My great-great-grandfather was one of the crew. A couple more of the fishing boats that are just here behind me. This is our boat building section, so we've got Emery's boat shed display that's just over here, and lots of work, sort of tools and that kind of thing. But also we've got our Gansey, one of our finest ones that's on display, along with the other crafts that the fishermen made, because They didn't always go to sea. If the weather's rough, you can't go to sea, you don't get paid. So they had to turn their hand to other things. Quite a lot of them went flint picking for the potteries industry. Some of them made baskets, mended their pots, obviously nets and things like that. Some of the fishermen made miniature pots and sold them to tourists. But there are lots of other kind of rope work and other type of craft items, I suppose we would call them, which are incredibly skilled and rather beautiful that we've got here in the case, and I'm particularly fond of that. That's why it's quite crammed. I do like it.
Who made the mermaid?
Oh gosh, that's me. There's a mermaid trail around the building for the children to spot. One of the volunteers, she does a washing activity so she'll dress up as Mrs. Peg. So she gets out the laundry, and it's surprising how many children don't know what the smell of carbolic soap is, or what a mangle is, or even, just the washing tubs and the whole dolly type thing. So they come out and they just laugh at Victorian knickers mostly, actually, yeah.
I love this little shop fronts as you wander through the corridor. It's great.
Shannock Street. So we've got all different shops here that were here in the town. So we've got Pratt's Saddlery Shop. Now, Pratt's is a very special shop for us, because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have the museum. So the Pratt family actually owned the cottages that the museum started in. When Mr. Pratt passed away, he actually, in his legacy, was to give us the cottages, but the trade-off was that we got all the contents of his shop as well. So we've made a complete shop, and it is much tidier than his shop would have been, because it was the most untidy shop ever, and everybody sort of knows about that and relates to it. However, I think that we've tried to do it justice a little bit. It's a bit less mucky, but he knew where everything was and he could put his hands on it. So, I mean, it may have been untidy, but he knew his stock.
Yeah, we used to have a wonderful shop called Clark's in Aylsham, which was a hardware shop. And as an individual, you could never find anything, but he always knew exactly where the nut or the bolt that you needed, pointing in the direction. He had everything. It was just brilliant.
Yeah, mind you, Blythe and Wrights is like that here in Sheringham as well. That's going to be included in our display. So I've got to pinch bits of our display here in the main part of the museum. I'm going to be taking Ronnie Wright upstairs for our celebration of the last 50 years of the town exhibition this year. So he'll be up there, and he's a large cutout with his 4 candles in his khaki brats in his outfit there. So I've got to put that upstairs. So bless him. So Blythe and Wrights will be featuring upstairs. It's been one of the stalwarts of Sheringham, because it is still a very big part of the town, and you can go in there and just buy one screw, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. It's fantastic.
And if anybody has any time to spare, just ring up and just listen to their answer phone message. It's hilarious. It is so funny. It absolutely. I listened to it 6 times 2 days ago just to make me laugh, and I keep telling them. It says we're the best in the world, and it's brilliant in a very Norfolk accent. I just love it.
That's great. Oh, a man trap.
Oh, man trap.
The kids' favourite thing.
Yeah. So a lot of the children like to come in to here, and we also have school parties that come in, and this particular area depicts social history within Sheringham. And although we tend to think about the lifeboatmen and the fishermen, there's a lot of agriculture went on, and a lot of those fishermen had to plough the fields for their own food. So it's worth having a little look, including the rather nasty man trap. Sheringham suffered during both World Wars, but we do have the innards to the bomb that fell from the Zeppelin right through one of the fishermen's cottages, narrowly missing the little girl who was sitting in a high chair. Nobody was hurt. In fact, the lady of the house popped it all in a bucket and took it outside. They were very, very fortunate, weren't they?
She put the bomb in a bucket like that was going to do anything.
Well,
a bucket of water. Yeah, she put it in a bucket of water.
Safety first and all that.
Safety first, yeah. I think somebody slightly slipped off a stool with shock, and that was it. Miss Alice Jeffreys was a spinster lady between the wars, and she used to run a wood carving school for fisher boys and some of the men to learn different skills. This is something that would add an extra string to the bow for when the weather was bad, and some of them were very gifted. So we were lucky enough to be able to have, as part of a bequest, this lovely cabinet that's here as well, that was made during that period of time by a lovely local gentleman whose father made it. He used to run our garage here. He passed away sadly last year, Mr. Funnel from Funnel's Garage. So we're very lucky to have that, because we don't have very many pieces, and it was part of a sort of royal initiative. They've got a big collection of similar home arts and education and the crafting over at Sandringham. So I went over to Sandringham when we had an exhibition to do with folk art a few years ago, and we'd borrowed this lovely cabinet, and then here we are, and it's now been given to us, so it's now in our main social history gallery, so that's a nice addition, I think. The John Crask Gallery is a new one. John Crask is a Sheringham fisherman who was born here but moved over with the rest of his family over in Dereham, but we've adopted him as being from his hometown is here because he was schooled here to start off with, and he was too ill to go to sea, so he painted to make a living. It was, hand to mouth, very much so, swapping paintings for hospital medicines, doctor's visits, food, all of that type of thing. And when he got too ill to paint, he would embroider. His wife Laura taught him some embroidery stitches, so he's unusual. He's a little bit like Alfred Wallace, who's down in Cornwall. So we've got the John Crask collection. We've got some here, there's some over at Aldeburgh, quite a lot in private hands as well. But we have a lot of his embroideries. I think Laura taught him to embroider because she basically just said, well, you're not painting in bed and I'm not going to have any of that, so he would do that. And they're absolutely stunning, and they're very much, you can actually tell that he knows how the sea works, how a boat cuts through the sea. You can see the wake of the boat. They're not as naive as some of the naive paintings. The Alfred Wallace ones are beautiful, but the perspective is odd, and it's somebody who's not used to the sea. So we're working on a new film that's going to go in this space, so that's what we were talking about only yesterday, weren't we, Mhairi?
Indeed.
I love the fact that you can stand on the balcony and look down to the boats. You just have to look at the size of those oars and that boat and just realise how strong they must have been.
We've got 72 volunteers at the moment, but we're a very large building. We're across 3 floors. Yeah. So you can imagine that when we're open, that people will be stewarding on each floor, and they'll be able to sort of talk about different aspects of things. And some of them just point people in the right direction because they get lost around the building, which does happen on a daily basis. Yeah, it does happen.
Oh, another mammoth.
Oh, yes.
I like that one. That's fabulous.
Amazing, isn't he?
That's great.
He was part of a huge walking puppet, I believe, and Lisa will know much more about that than I do. We've had him here again for a couple of years now, and he really is pretty impressive, I think.
His eyes are amazing, the way they follow you. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Those are taxidermy eyes for large mammals. So that's why they're good eyes. They're good eyes. So humongous, yes, made by Jeremy Moore and Susie Lay. Susie Lay had the idea for it to make a large steppe mammoth so it would walk on Westrington Beach. And I can remember actually being there when they did that. So there's a person on each leg, but then there were other people that that held strings because it was quite a windy day and it blew. So it was made out of aviation grade ply, so very thin. It's very clever because that just piece of grey net that's over it just gives you a hint of the actual body of him. Yeah, it is just his head though, and he's hanging at the same height he would have been when he walked. So looking at him in comparison with the size of the Manchester Unity, and we're on the 2nd floor now, mammoths were big, steppe mammoths were very big.
Well, what a wonderful, wonderful space. It's just fantastic. And so when is the museum open from until?
So we're open on March the 29th, and we're open 6 days a week. We close on Sundays, and we're open until the 1st of November, with the exception of International Gansey Day, which is on the 22nd of November, and we open for 1 day only for that.
I highly recommend taking a walk along the Sheringham seafront on any day of the year. Make sure you pop in here and have a look round. And of course, the great thing about Sheringham is that there's always great fish and chips available once you've done your history.
Come along and visit us. We'd be glad to see you.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for showing me around. That's really kind of you.
You're very welcome.
Hi everyone, it's Ollie from the One Stop Nature Shop here with another winter update. Today I'm going to be talking about a few different things that have been going on, and we're going to start off with the quite incredible pink-footed goose, which is one of Norfolk's most iconic species. We're very lucky on the Norfolk coast to be able to have huge numbers of these, around 70,000 each winter, of the total 400,000 that are generally found in the UK during the winter months, making Norfolk one of this species' most important areas. They tend to arrive in late September, but mostly in October, from Iceland and Greenland, with the majority of the Norfolk population being of Icelandic origin. They're amazing, really, when it comes to their migration, with their migration time only taking 6 hours to fly from Iceland to the Faroe Islands, and a set of islands between the UK and Iceland, and then it takes a further day for them to arrive in the UK, and then they trickle down from the north coast of Scotland. They can be seen along the Norfolk coast, starting in the west from areas like Holme, then obviously here at Burnham Deepdale, right through to Holcombe, then along to Cley and sort of the east end of the Norfolk coast. You can obviously pick them out by their very iconic call. If you see them and they're not calling or they're not flying, then their pink legs and pink bills are quite a telltale sign. But they're generally quite a bulky goose. Not one of the largest, won't be certainly as large as a greylag or a Canada goose, but they are pretty distinctive. So the Norfolk coast is obviously blessed with its amazing coastal marshes, be that both salt marsh and fresh marsh. And these amazing habitats are perfect wintering grounds for a wide range of species, not just the pink-footed geese that we spoke about earlier. So species that you might find on the marsh range from the large and the sort of very vocal, such as Eurasian curlew and Eurasian oystercatcher, right down to the diminutive and often hard to see species like common snipe and, if you're very lucky, jack snipe. Other species you might see, certainly in big flocks, are northern lapwing and European golden plover, and if you go to certain areas of the coast, especially on the west side of the Norfolk coast, red knot, bar-tailed godwit, dunlin and sandling can also be seen in large numbers. The Norfolk coast really is very, very special for these species and very important. A lot of them, especially birds like dunlin, breed in the high Arctic, in the north coast of places like Norway, even as far up as Svalbard, right up in the Arctic Circle, and they then make their way south to winter here when those particular areas become inhospitable. There is actually one wading bird which does winter here, only in a very small numbers, that does stay in those northern climates all year round, which is the purple sandpiper. But those are quite hard to see in Norfolk, with, weirdly enough, the promenade at Sheringham often being the best place to see those. Other birds of the marshes include, now due to sort of a change in climate, Eurasian spoonbill, great egret and cattle egret. They're all around on the Norfolk coast at the moment. Obviously staple birds like western marsh harrier, red kite can also be joined by rarities like hen harrier, which are very distinctive, especially the males, with their sort of silver coloration. And then it's also worth looking out for large flocks of birds, especially small birds like finches, such as chaffinch and goldfinch, because they may have really stunning finch species like brambling mixed in with them. And there are also thrush groups as well, which can include redwings and fieldfare. If you're looking at the sea, then common goldeneye, long-tailed duck, red-throated diver are all the more common species, with great northern diver and black-throated diver also being possible. So thank you for listening once again to this podcast. If you are visiting us in Burnham Deepdale, then do pop into the shop. We are open at the moment 9:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon, and that's until the 14th of February. From the 15th, we'll be changing to our summer hours of 10 a.m. till 5 p.m, which runs until the end of October. We're obviously open for all the local bird news. We've also got some really exciting new products, such as the new Kite image stabilised spotting scope, which is truly unique among spotting scopes in that you get really high magnification without the need for a tripod. And we should have that in the shop from the end of February. We're also doing currently 5% off on our website on pretty much every item that we sell. If you're a new customer to us, then you can get a discount code via our homepage. So once again, thank you for listening, and hope to see you in Burnham Deepdale very soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deepdale Podcast. We love putting together these episodes, discovering the people and places around the beautiful North Norfolk coast. If you have suggestions of people we should chat with or places we should visit, then please do email podcast@deepdalepodcast.co.uk. Please do subscribe to the Deepdale Podcast wherever you usually get your podcasts from, and please let your friends and family know about us. If you have the time, we'd love you to leave a review, as it all helps encourage more listeners. See you again soon. Thanks for listening.